Every problem has a solution that will lead to an outcome that you can be satisfied and happy with. Some problems, however, seem so grand or so complicated that it's hard to fathom the solution that will lead to the ideal outcome. When this happens, many people assume that there is no solution, but you know that all problems have solutions that lead to outcomes that you can be satisfied and happy with. To find that solution, you may remember that it's useful to think outside the box. That is something that people often say when they just want to solve a problem that seems difficult. Just think outside the box. But what is outside the box thinking, and how do you do it? And to help explain, I'll use a riddle that I first heard back in the 1990s. A man and his son are driving in a car one day and they get into a fatal accident. The man is killed instantly and the boy is knocked unconscious, but he's still alive. The boy is rushed to the hospital and will need immediate surgery. The doctor enters the emergency room, looks at the boy and says, "I cannot operate on him. He's my son." After hearing the riddle, you're asked to explain it. But after hearing it the first time, I could not explain it. Numerous people around me couldn't explain it either. We were all wondering, how could the boy's father suddenly be alive and capable of performing surgery? At this time, we were all thinking inside the box. But there was one person who was thinking outside the box, and that person filled us all in. The doctor is the boy's mother. All of a sudden, something that seemed so complicated and mysterious became so obvious. The riddle seemed unsolvable until someone came along with their outside-the-box thinking. But what was that inside-the-box thinking? What was the outside-the-box thinking? How can we think outside the box when faced with these difficult challenges? Inside-the-box thinking was the result of old-fashioned views of what a doctor is, in combination with the riddle's guided focus on a man and his son. When I first heard this riddle, we all knew that women were doctors. But at the same time, if you said the word doctor, the overwhelming majority of people would think of a man. At that time, the majority of doctors really were men. So without taking the time to think it through, if someone used the word doctor, most people would likely think of a man. Most people were thinking inside the box, and at this point I will define the box as a common way of thinking amongst groups of people with a similar perspective. In the 1990s, people thought of doctors as being men. Inside the box thinking back then would be to think of a doctor as a man. And clearly that inside the box thinking was detrimental, and we needed to start thinking outside the box. Thinking outside the box means that you change your perspective and you make different assumptions than you'd made before. These assumptions will likely be different than the generally held assumptions of a given group of people. When you make new assumptions, the answer becomes clear. Thinking outside the box in the 1990s meant that rather than assume that a doctor was a man, you would assume that a doctor could either be a man or a woman. That outside the box assumption would make it easy for you to solve the riddle. In the 1990s, when you solved the riddle, people would accept your solution because while they were not really thinking of female doctors, they knew that women were also doctors, and your answer would be satisfactory to them. But what about in the 1890s or in the 1790s? What were the views during that time? Do you think that people would accept your answer in the 1800s? The doctor was his mother. During these times, large groups of people might actually reject your answer and they might chastise you. They might say that you are dumb for believing that a woman could be a doctor. They might dismiss you and go on to attempt the riddle using convoluted explanations. All the while, the answer was simple and right in front of them. But the group's perspective, their inside-the-box thinking, prevented them from knowing the answer, even as the answer was being handed to them on a silver platter. The larger group may go on to believe that the riddle is not solvable. All the while, anyone who knows that women can be doctors will solve the riddle quickly. Outside-the-box thinking empowers you to solve a problem quickly and to get back to whatever you would otherwise be doing. Outside-the-box thinking empowers you to solve a problem that seems unsolvable. Therefore, this type of thinking expands your possibilities. Coming back to modern day, knowing that women are doctors, that's no longer outside the box thinking. That's very common knowledge. In modern day, if you want to think outside the box on this subject, you now have to accept the idea that a doctor might neither be a man nor a woman. Right now, in the year 2023, inside the box thinking on this subject would be to assume that a doctor must either be a man or a woman. Given the current debate on gender identity, you might quickly assume that outside-the-box thinking is to consider that a doctor might be a person who neither identifies as a man or a woman. To be fair, that assumption is somewhat outside the box. But most people are very well aware of the discussion on gender, and if you suggest that a particular doctor is neither a man nor a woman, a person may easily conclude that this is a story about gender, which is based on commonly held beliefs within our society. Further outside the box thinking on this subject in modern day would be to accept that a doctor might not even be human. Given advances in technology and artificial intelligence, this is a possibility. Thinking inside the box means that your logic uses widely held assumptions and beliefs. Widely held assumptions and beliefs. Those assumptions and beliefs really were useful up until right now, a time when you cannot solve a problem using those widely held assumptions and beliefs. Those values or rules of thumb that got you here are now holding you back from moving forward and solving new problems. Your solution is to think outside the box, make new assumptions, uphold new values. But that still seems quite vague. What new assumptions should you make? What new values should you hold? And how do you know that you're doing the right thing? The answer is a state of mind solution. Thinking outside the box occurs naturally when you are satisfied, joyous, uplifted. When your self-confidence is peaking and you're in a good mood, meaning you can face any problem, but you still feel confident that a solution will be found. When in this state of mind, you naturally think outside the box. You know by how you feel if you're open to outside the box thinking. If you feel fear, sadness, or angry or ambivalence, you're likely to stay inside the box. If you feel joyous and self-confident, if you feel relaxed and certain, you are likely to think outside the box. The lesson here is to be intentional about the way that you feel. Happiness is power, and this happiness will cause you to think outside the box. Clarity comes when you feel uplifted. You are open to new perspectives and ideas when you feel uplifted. This is the strongest strategy that I can offer for outside the box thinking, and it will work. You'll find your solutions, but with that said, you may also find resistance from the people around you with your outside the box thinking. Imagine suggesting in the year 1890 that a woman could be a doctor. What do you think people would say about you? How would you feel about what people are saying about you? How would you deal with that? The answer is, of course, self-love, self-appreciation, and a narrow focus on the good that you are creating with what you know. In 2 other videos in this goal-oriented people series, I discussed the topic of how to be heard, and this is very useful for people who commonly think outside the box and find solutions, yet they have trouble getting their communities to accept their solutions. If you find yourself feeling frustrated when you have an answer that people will just not accept, the strategy offered in these videos will be very useful to you. The lessons learned here are that all problems have solutions that yield outcomes that you can be satisfied and happy with. If you cannot find the solution, you're thinking inside the box. To some degree, we are all thinking inside the box. This is empowering knowledge. You know that you're thinking inside the box when you've come across a problem that you feel is unsolvable. That's the tell. When this happens, find a way to feel satisfied now, happy now, self-confident now. When you do this, as you are able to return your attention to the problem, but you're able to maintain your mental state of clarity and joy, that your gut will tell you exactly what is right. Your perspective will naturally shift and you will automatically be thinking outside the box. With this outside the box thinking, you will see all of the solutions that you never knew were right in front of you. Sending good vibes.